Okay, so you want to own a casino. Sounds simple enough, right? You build a big shiny building, put some tables and machines in it, hire a few dealers, and just wait for the money to roll in. People walk in, they play, the house wins, you get rich. Um, yeah, that's basically what everyone assumes. But here's the thing. The actual economics of owning a casino are so much stranger and so much more calculated than the house always wins. Because the house doesn't just win, the house is running one of the most mathematically precise, psychologically engineered, and brutally expensive businesses on the planet. And a shocking number of casinos, even with the math permanently rigged in their favor, still go bankrupt. Let's start with the myth because it's a good one. Most people think a casino makes money because gambling is rigged, like there's some guy in a back room flipping a switch to make you lose. That's not really how it works. And honestly, it doesn't need to work that way, because the math already does the job. Every single game in a casino has something called a house edge, a tiny built-in mathematical advantage baked directly into the rules of the game. On American roulette, that edge is around 5.26%. On slot machines, depending on the machine, it can range anywhere from 2% up to 15% or more. On blackjack, if you're playing with zero skill, the house edge might be around 2%. But if you're playing perfect strategy, it can shrink to under 0.5%. Here's the part that blows people's minds. A 5% house edge doesn't sound like much. It sounds like something you could beat on a good night. And you can, for a night. But casinos aren't playing for a night. They're playing across millions of hands, millions of spins, millions of dice rolls, every single day, forever. And when you run a slightly in your favor coin flip millions of times, the law of large numbers kicks in and turns that small edge into a mathematical certainty. It's the same principle an insurance company uses. Any one policyholder might get lucky and never file a claim, but across 100,000 policyholders, the company can predict, almost to the dollar, how much they'll pay out. Casinos are just insurance companies that happen to be dressed up like nightclubs. So if the math is guaranteed, if the house always wins eventually, why do casinos need to spend so insanely much money just to open the doors? This is where it gets interesting, because building a casino is one of the most capital-intensive businesses you can start. We're not talking about a small operation here. A modest regional casino, think of something you'd find off a highway exit, not the Vegas Strip, can cost anywhere from $50 million to $200 million just to build. A serious Vegas-style resort casino, the kind with a hotel tower, multiple restaurants, a theater, a spa, a shopping promenade, those routinely run $1 to $3 billion. The Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas cost around $3.9 billion to build. Resorts World Las Vegas came in at roughly $4.3 billion, and that's before a single card gets dealt. Where does all that money actually go? Here's the breakdown that surprises people. The gaming floor, the tables, the slot machines, the roulette wheels, all the stuff you associate with a casino is actually a relatively small slice of the total cost. A single high-end slot machine can cost $15,000 to $25,000, and a big casino floor might have 2,000 to 3,000 of them, so you're looking at tens of millions just in machines. But the real money, the stuff that eats the budget alive, is the building itself. Steel, concrete, electrical systems, HVAC systems massive enough to climate control a small city, plumbing for thousands of hotel rooms, fire suppression systems, security infrastructure with thousands of cameras wired into a central surveillance room that rivals a Pentagon control center. Then there's licensing. Getting a gaming license in a place like Nevada or New Jersey isn't a form you fill out. It's a process that can take years and cost tens of millions in legal fees, background checks, and compliance work. because regulators are terrified of organized crime infiltrating the industry for very well-documented historical reasons. And here's a metaphor that helps us click. Building a casino is like building an airport. You're not really in the business of flying planes. You're in the business of managing an enormous, complex piece of infrastructure, and the planes are almost incidental to how much money and complexity actually goes into keeping the whole thing running. A casino is the same. The gambling is almost the smallest, simplest part of the operation. The real business is running a self-contained city. Hotel rooms, restaurants, bars, entertainment venues, retail, parking structures, security, HR for thousands of employees. And the casino floor is just the engine room that makes the whole city profitable enough to justify existing. So now you've spent your billion, maybe $2 billion, and the doors are finally open. How does the money actually flow in? This is where the design of the building itself becomes almost sinister in its cleverness. Casino floor design isn't decorated by someone with good taste. It's engineered, sometimes down to the carpet pattern, by behavioral psychologists and architects who specialize in something the industry literally calls gaming ecology. Think about the last time you walked through a casino, or picture it if you never have. There are no clocks anywhere. There are very few windows, and the ones that exist are often tinted or positioned, so you lose track of whether it's day or night. This isn't an accident. It's a deliberate strategy to disconnect you from the passage of time, because time awareness is one of the biggest triggers that makes people stop gambling and go do something else. The layout itself is often described as a maze, with curving pathways instead of straight lines, specifically so that walking from the entrance to, say, the bathroom or the exit takes you past dozens of slot machines you didn't intend to see. It's the same principle IKEA uses to make you walk past 1,000 items you didn't come in for. Except in a casino, every one of those items is a machine with a mathematically embedded profit margin. Then there's the sound design. Slot machines are tuned, literally tuned by sound engineers, to play in the key of C because it's a pleasant, non-jarring key that blends into background noise without becoming annoying over hours of exposure. Every win, even a tiny one where you technically lose money overall, is accompanied by triumphant chimes and flashing lights, because the human brain doesn't distinguish well between I won 40 cents and I won. That's called a loss disguised as a win, and researchers have found it's one of the most powerful psychological hooks in modern gambling design. Some studies suggest the majority of slot machine spins that pay out anything at all are actually net losses once you account for what was wagered, but they're presented to your brain as victories. Here's the thing about the money flow, though. It's not evenly distributed at all. Slot machines, unglamorous as they are, generate somewhere between 65 and 80% of a typical casino's total gaming revenue, even though table games get all the cinematic attention in movies. Why? Because slots require zero social interaction, zero skill, and can run a player through hundreds of bets per hour, way faster than any table game where a dealer has to physically deal cards or spin a wheel between each round. A slot machine can process a bet every 3 to 5 seconds. That's up to 1,200 bets an hour, each one carrying that same built-in house edge, compounding relentlessly. Table games are actually the premium experience that draws people in and builds the brand and the atmosphere. But the slot floor is the actual profit engine, quietly grinding away in the background. And then there's the high rollers, which is a whole different economic universe. Casinos have a term for their best customers: whales. These are gamblers who might bet hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in a single visit. And here's the counterintuitive part. Casinos will fly these people in on private jets, comp their hotel suites, comp their meals, sometimes even hand them cash just to walk through the door, because the math on whales is so favorable that losing money on the comps is essentially a marketing expense. If a casino is offering a reduced house edge deal to a whale to lure them in, but that whale is going to sit at a baccarat table for 6 hours, putting through tens of millions of dollars in total action, the house edge, even a small one, turns into a virtual mathematical guarantee of massive profit. It's like a grocery store selling milk at a loss because they know you'll fill your whole cart with other stuff while you're there. Except the cart here can run into 8 figures. Now here's where the story gets genuinely strange, because you'd think with all this, the guaranteed math, the psychological engineering, the whale economics, casinos would be basically unkillable businesses. And yet casinos go bankrupt constantly. Atlantic City alone lost 5 casinos between 2014 and 2016. The Revel Casino in Atlantic City cost $2.4 billion to build and closed after barely 2 years of operation, eventually selling for a tiny fraction of its construction cost. Even in Vegas, the supposed capital of guaranteed gambling profits, casinos have gone under, been foreclosed on, or been sold at massive losses. How does a business with a mathematically locked-in edge somehow lose money? The first reason is debt. Almost nobody builds a billion-dollar casino with cash. These projects are financed with enormous loans, often at fairly aggressive interest rates, because lenders know casino construction is risky and cost overruns are basically the industry standard. Revel, for example, was loaded with debt from the start, and even before it opened, cost overruns had already ballooned the budget. When a business owes hundreds of millions in interest payments every year, it doesn't matter that the gaming floor has a positive house edge. If the interest payments outpace the profit the floor generates, you're bleeding out regardless of how good your math is. It's like owning a vending machine that reliably makes you $2 a day in profit, except you took out a loan to buy the vending machine that costs you $5 a day in interest. The machine works, technically, you still go broke. The second reason is location and saturation. Casinos are hyper-dependent on foot traffic and tourism, and when too many casinos open in the same region chasing the same pool of gamblers, they cannibalize each other's revenue. Atlantic City is the textbook case. As regional casinos opened up throughout Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland, gamblers who used to drive to Atlantic City suddenly had a casino 20 minutes from home. And Atlantic City's overall gaming revenue collapsed by roughly half over about a decade. A casino that was profitable in a world with limited competition can become instantly unprofitable the moment 3 new casinos open within driving distance. The third reason is the sheer weight of fixed costs. Remember, the gaming floor is only part of the operation. You're also running a massive hotel, paying thousands of staff, running restaurants that often lose money and exist mainly to keep guests on property, maintaining aging infrastructure, and paying property taxes on some of the largest buildings in the region. All of that overhead exists whether or not gamblers show up. During slow seasons, during economic downturns, during something like a pandemic where the entire building has to shut down, that overhead doesn't pause. It just keeps eating cash while revenue disappears entirely. Multiple Vegas casinos nearly collapsed during 2020 for exactly this reason, sitting on billions in debt with essentially zero revenue for months. And then there's simple bad management and bad bets, sometimes literally. Casinos occasionally lose enormous sums to skilled advantage players who find genuine mathematical edges in specific games, or to organize cheating rings that exploit weaknesses in procedures. There's also the reputational risk. A casino's entire business model depends on people trusting the games are fair, and any major scandal, any hint of rigged machines or unfair practices can tank customer trust and revenue for years. So when a casino does succeed, and plenty do, spectacularly, what does the actual payoff scenario look like? A well-run, well-located casino resort with manageable debt can generate extraordinary margins. Some of the top Vegas Strip resorts report annual gaming revenue in the hundreds of millions to over $1 billion, with the actual profit margin on the gaming floor itself often exceeding 15 to 20% once operational costs are accounted for, a margin most retail businesses would consider a fantasy. The real winners in this industry aren't the ones betting on any single night of gambling. They're the ones who built the building, priced the debt correctly, filled the floor with slot machines instead of relying purely on table games, mastered the psychology of the layout, and most importantly, survived long enough for the law of large numbers to do what it always does: grind out a small, relentless compounding edge, spin after spin, hand after hand, year after year, until that tiny percentage becomes an absolute fortune. Because that's the real secret nobody tells you about casinos. It was never really about luck. It was never even really about gambling. It's about building a machine precise enough, patient enough, and expensive enough that math simply cannot lose. As long as you can survive the debt, the competition, and the overhead long enough to let that math actually play out.